Hey there. Ready to dive deep into some philosophical waters today.
Yeah.
We're tackling this concept from Buddhist philosophy that's really kind of been blowing my mind lately. It's all about this thing called fabrication.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful idea. And, it really challenges those everyday assumptions we all have about, reality. I mean, we tend to think of what we experience as just sort of out there, objective, solid. But from the Buddhist perspective, it suggests that our minds play a much more active role in, actually creating the reality that we experience than we realize.
Yeah. And what I find so fascinating about it is it's not even just about, how we perceive things. It goes deeper than that. It's like even our sense of self, who we think we are at our core, that's considered a kind of fabrication too.
Exactly. And that's where things get really, really interesting.
For sure. So to help us unpack this concept, we're diving into excerpts from this book called The Mirror of Insight.
Yeah, it's a great book. It focuses on these key chapters that I think you'll find pretty mind-bending.
Oh, I'm sure. So the book kind of starts by laying out these two dilemmas that the Buddha himself wrestled with. The first one is if suffering is caused by all these fabricated experiences,
right,
how can we ever reach a state of liberation that's not fabricated? Are we just stuck in this cycle forever? Is there even a way out?
Right. And then the second dilemma is okay, if craving for things, wanting things to be a certain way, and then also wanting things to not be a certain way, both lead to suffering.
Yeah.
How do we even act in the world without creating more suffering? It's like this total catch-22.
Totally. It's like every move we make is just going to lead to more of the thing we're trying to escape. So how did the Buddha even begin to solve these seemingly impossible dilemmas?
Right. It's not like he could just magically make fabrication disappear, could he?
Exactly.
Well, that's where the Buddha's genius comes in, I think.
Yeah.
He realized that while we can't directly create an unfabricated state through our fabricated actions, those actions can be used skillfully to create a path towards it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. It's like building a raft to cross a river. The raft is essential for getting to the other side.
Yeah.
But once you're there, you don't need it anymore.
I love that. That's a perfect analogy. So it's not about denying our experiences or trying to force our minds to be blank, It's more about understanding the tools we have, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and then using them in a way that leads us towards a more liberated state.
Yeah, precisely. The Buddha wasn't advocating for a life of, passivity or detachment from the world. It was more about engaging with the world in a way that is skillful and liberating.
Okay, so we've got this idea of using fabrication as a tool, but how do we even understand what fabrication is in the first place? The book talks about these two frameworks that the Buddha used, the 5 aggregates and the 3 fabrications.
Right. And those frameworks are essentially different ways of looking at the same phenomena, know, which is how our minds actively shape our experience.
Okay, so let's start with the 5 aggregates. These are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Right.
It sounds kind of technical, but it's actually super relevant to how we experience life every single day.
Oh, absolutely. The 5 aggregates are constantly interacting and influencing each other to create our experience of the world and of ourselves.
There's this one passage in the book that really brought this home for me. It talks about how mental formations, which include things like our thoughts and intentions, actually take potential experiences and transform them into the actual experiences we have.
Right.
It's our minds are constantly filtering and shaping reality based on our own, internal landscape.
Yeah, and that internal landscape is always changing, which is why the Buddhist perspective emphasizes impermanence as a core principle.
Right. So it's not there's some fixed reality out there that we're just, passively observing. We're co-creating it all the time, whether we're aware of it or not.
Exactly. And that realization can be both empowering and humbling.
For sure. Now, the book also explains how the 5 aggregates contribute to our sense of self-identity, which, is often the source of a lot of our suffering.
Right. Yeah. Because we tend to cling to these aggregates, our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, as if they were a solid, enduring me. But the Buddha's insight was that all of these things are impermanent and constantly changing. So there's no fixed entity there to cling to.
And there's this great quote from Sister Dhamma that really stuck with me. She describes these 4 ways that people mistakenly assume a self exists in relation to the aggregates. It's we're constantly trying to find ourselves in these fleeting, changing experiences.
Right. We might say, I am this body, or I am these feelings, or I am this mind. But if we look closely, we can see that none of those statements really hold up.
It's almost like this trick our minds are playing on us. Have you ever caught yourself doing that? Like identifying strongly with your physical appearance or your intelligence or your emotional pattern?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Something we all do. But becoming aware of those patterns is the first step to like freeing ourselves from their grip.
So understanding the five aggregates is like starting to see the scaffolding behind the building, you know,
Yeah.
the structure that creates our experience of self. But where does that leave us? Are we just these like empty shells with no real essence?
That's where the three fabrications come in. They offer another perspective on how we interact with the world and how we can use that understanding to move towards liberation.
Okay, so we've really explored the five aggregates and how they create this illusion of a solid self. Now, how do the three fabrications fit into all of this?
Well, the three fabrications, they're bodily, verbal, and mental. And they're essentially the ways that this fabricated self expresses itself and interacts with the world.
It's interesting because it seems like these fabrications are happening all the time, whether we're like conscious of them or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why the book emphasizes the importance of cultivating awareness. The more we can see these fabrications at work, the more freedom we have to choose how we engage with them, you know?
Yeah. So let's like break down these three fabrications. Bodily fabrication seems pretty straightforward. It's our physical actions, right? Like walking, talking, eating, all that.
Yeah, but it's not just about the actions themselves. It's also about the intention and awareness behind them. Are we acting out of habit? Or are we acting with intention, you know?
Yeah.
Are we fully present in our actions? Or are we lost in thought?
Yeah, I'm starting to see how this whole concept of fabrication can really change how we approach everyday life. It's not just about like what we do, but how we do it.
Exactly. And this brings us to verbal fabrication, which is all about our speech. You know, it's not just the words we say, it's also like the tone of voice, the intention behind the words, and, you know, the impact that our words have on others.
You know, I've definitely had moments where I've said something without like really thinking it through, and it's caused harm or like created unnecessary conflict. It really makes me realize how important it is to be mindful of our speech, to like choose our words carefully and speak with kindness and compassion.
Absolutely. And then we have mental fabrication, which is perhaps the most subtle and pervasive of the three. This encompasses all of our thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and intentions. You know, it's that constant chatter of the mind, the stories we tell ourselves, the judgments we make, and all the desires we chase.
It feels like mental fabrication is like where so much of our suffering originates. You know, we get caught up in these negative thought patterns, these worries and anxieties, and it creates so much inner turmoil.
Right. And the book makes this really fascinating connection between the three fabrications and the concept of karma. It suggests that all of our actions, bodily, verbal, and mental, create these ripples, shaping not only our present experience, but also the conditions for our future experiences.
That's a really powerful idea. It means that we're not just passive recipients of fate, you know? We're active creators of our own reality.
Right. And that responsibility can feel kind of daunting at times, but it's also incredibly empowering. It means we have the ability to change our lives, to create more happiness and freedom for ourselves and others by becoming more conscious of our fabrications.
Now, there's this quote from Sister Dhamma that I found really helpful in understanding these three fabrications. She defines them so simply. She says, in and out breaths are bodily fabrications, directed thought and evaluation are verbal fabrications, and perceptions and feelings are mental fabrications.
Right.
It's such a good reminder that these fabrications aren't just some like abstract concept. They're literally happening in every moment, woven into the fabric of our experience.
Yeah.
So knowing all of this, how do we even start to like work with these fabrications? How can we become more skillful in our actions, our speech, and our thoughts?
That's where the practice of mindfulness comes in, you know, by cultivating awareness of our present moment experience, our breath, our body, our thoughts, our feelings, we can start to see these fabrications more clearly and make more conscious choices.
So it's not about trying to stop our minds from thinking or force ourselves to never feel negative emotions. It's more about like observing these things without judgment, seeing them as they are.
Exactly. And as we become more aware of our habitual patterns, we can start to loosen their grip on us. You know, we can choose to act with more kindness and intention, to speak with more care and compassion, and to cultivate more wholesome thoughts and emotions.
Now, the book also talks about how the practice of concentration, especially through jhana meditation, can help us dismantle these fabrications and gain deeper insights into the nature of reality.
Yeah, jhana is often translated as absorption. It refers to a state of deep meditative concentration, where the mind becomes incredibly still and clear.
I've dabbled in meditation a bit, but I've never experienced anything like what you're describing. It sounds almost like a different state of consciousness.
It is, in a way, you know, through jhana, We can systematically deconstruct our experience layer by layer and really see how it's all put together. The book uses this really valid analogy of separating metals and ore through increasing heat. As we apply the heat of concentrated awareness, the different types of fabrication kind of start to melt away, revealing the true nature of our minds.
So it's like we're using this like intense focus to refine our awareness, to like purify our experience. That's such a cool metaphor. And the source material even goes into detail about the specific fabrications that cease at each stage of jhana. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Right. For example, as we enter the first jhana, speech ceases. In the second, jhana-directed thought and evaluation quiet down. And as we progress through the jhanas, even bodily fabrications like the feeling of the breath fade away.
Wow. So it culminates in the cessation of perception and feeling in the fourth jhana. That's like a level of stillness I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's a profound state of tranquility and clarity, a glimpse into the unfabricated nature of reality.
But even if we never reach those like advanced states of jhana, the understanding we gain along the way can still be transformative, right? Like just knowing that these fabrications exist and that we have the power to work with them.
Oh, absolutely. Even a basic understanding of fabrication can have profound impact on our lives. It can help us to cultivate greater self-awareness and compassion, make more skillful choices in our actions, speech, and thoughts, and ultimately find greater peace and freedom amidst the challenges of life.
So this concept of fabrication isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's like a practical tool for living a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. It's a path to awakening, a way to see the world with fresh eyes and create a reality that's more aligned with our deepest values.
Wow, so we've unpacked these two frameworks, the 5 aggregates and the 3 fabrications. And it's really shifted how I think about my own experiences, It's like I'm starting to see the strings behind the puppet show, the mechanics of how my mind is creating this whole world.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And once you start to see those strings, you can't unsee them. It changes your whole perspective.
Totally. And the thing is, it's not about becoming cynical or like disillusioned with the world. It's more about like understanding the nature of reality so that we can work with it skillfully, so that we can create more peace and freedom in our lives.
Yeah, that's a key point. The Buddha wasn't trying to make us miserable by pointing out that everything is fabricated. He was actually offering us a path to liberation from suffering.
Okay, so if we're essentially constructing our own reality, what does that mean for things like enlightenment or awakening? Are those just more elaborate fabrications?
That's a great question. And it's actually something that's been debated by Buddhist philosophers for centuries. And the source material we're diving into actually touches on this very point. It suggests that even the experience of enlightenment is ultimately a fabrication. But it's a fabrication of a different kind.
Okay, now my mind is really bending. How is enlightenment a fabrication if it's supposed to be about like seeing through all the fabrications?
Yeah, it's definitely paradoxical.
Right.
But think of it this way. Even the experience of liberation, the experience of transcending the limitations of our ordinary mind, is still an experience. And any experience, even a blissful one, is ultimately impermanent and conditioned.
So even enlightenment has a beginning and an end. That's kind of a radical idea.
It is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't diminish the value or significance of awakening. In fact, it actually highlights the importance of not clinging to any experience, even the experience of enlightenment, as if it were some permanent state.
That makes sense. It's like even if we reach the other shore of the river, we don't want to get attached to the idea of like having arrived. We want to keep flowing, keep evolving.
Exactly. The journey is just as important as the destination, maybe even more so.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking about my own life and the ways that I've been constructing my own reality, often unconsciously, It's like I'm starting to see how my thoughts, my beliefs, my fears, they've all been shaping my experiences, creating limitations that I didn't even realize were there.
And that awareness is the first step to freedom. By recognizing the ways that we're fabricating our reality, we can start to make different choices, to create a reality that's more aligned with our values and aspirations.
Well, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener, I have to say. And it's left me feeling both challenged and inspired.
That's the beauty of Buddhist philosophy. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to look deeply into the nature of reality, and ultimately to live more consciously and compassionately.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of fabrication.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope this conversation has sparked some new insights and inspired you to look at your own experience with a fresh perspective.
And remember, even if it's all fabricated, life is still a pretty amazing journey.
So true. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep creating a reality that's filled with wisdom, compassion, and joy.